Okay, it being 6:30, I'll call a meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education to order. Today is Monday, May 13th, 2019, and we're at Oregon High School Innovation Center. Ms. Heitz, could you call the roll?
Ms. Feeney?
Present.
Ms. Oderico?
Here.
Ms. Flanagan?
Here.
Mr. Pankratz?
Here.
Ms. Bijak?
Here.
Mr. LeBrun? Mr. Zak?
Present. Mr. LeBrun is en route. He notified me that he is in traffic on 90 coming north, so he'll be here about 7:15, he thought. I have proof that the meeting has been appropriately noticed under Wisconsin Open Meetings Law, and a copy of those proofs will be with Ms. Heitz if anyone wants to inspect them. The agenda tonight, in terms of action items, we have one that's to approve a shared service agreement for Dane County School to Work, and then we have a number of informational items to work through that we won't take action on. And then a closed session at the conclusion of our regular meeting, and we will not be moving back into open session, will not be after the closed session. So I need a motion to approve the agenda as posted.
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
And a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed. We got an agenda. Consent calendar, I'm going to move staff assignments from that because Troy will have to recuse himself because as part of the staff assignments is approval of contracts, including his wife's. So other than staff assignments, is there anything else that any board member wishes to remove?
There are minutes from the last regular school board meeting, and I was not present. I don't think Barb was there. I don't think Tim was there. So I don't know how you want to handle that because I'm not sure you have a quorum to approve them because.
You would if, oh wait, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, Anna, oh, you were a board member then. weren't
She
you?
was a board member.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So we have a quorum for last meetings and then what's the other one?
You guys were here for the 8th, don't you? So, yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we've got so if you'll note when we approve those that Courtney, and you're abstaining with respect to the approval. Troy, from the 8th?
8th. I was not here.
22nd, yeah. Okay. So we've got that? All right, so that a vote will note those. I'm not going to call those separately. Okay. Then we'll have to remind Mr. LeBrun, well, he might be able to vote on these minutes next time. Anyway, anybody want to remove anything other than as noted with respect to abstentions? Okay, then I would need a motion to approve the consent calendar except for number 5.
I'll move approval.
Is there a second? Okay. We have 3 donations, one from Sharon George for $400 for student needs, Jill Fritz $200 for the Oregon Splash Pad, and Quick Trip donated in-kind materials for the bike rodeo, and we thank them for their donations. There are no contracts with respect to this, so all those in favor of the items on the consent calendar except for number 5 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries with the abstentions as noted. Then Mr. Pankratz is going to absent himself. And I need a motion to approve the staff assignments and contract changes as identified in your documents. And at your desk, you should have the updated version of the new staffing and contracts. Need a motion for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Would you take the roll?
Ms. Feeney?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Ms. Oderico?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. Zak?
Yes, that motion carries, noting an abstention from Mr. Pankratz. You can come back, Troy. Agenda item B is communication from the public. Policy, Board Policy 18004 establishes the opportunity for the public to address the board. Is anybody registered, Katie? Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak? Going twice, going 3 times. Moves to item C, information items. I don't see anyone from the OEA. Student report. Hey, Emily's back. Emily made a decision, we hear, right?
For college, yes. I'll
Tell
be
us.
attending UW-Madison. So, thank you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm filling in for Beck, and she has a ultimate Frisbee game tonight. So, yes. In regards to the school, prom is on Saturday, so that's exciting. Also, we have honors night this week, so the seniors will be awarded like local scholarships and stuff. So that should be fun. And last week was the variety show at the high school, so that's like the choir's final concert, my last concert ever at the high school. So that was weird, but lots of fun, and it was a really good turnout. So yeah.
And I understand we have an orchestra concert tonight, Mr. Pliner, and
Yes.
7 o'clock, and you get out of here to go watch that, okay? That's terrific. I have some folks in the music community in the Madison area that I know, and I sent them the picture of the 9 Oregonians who participated in the Madison Symphony Orchestra concert of 1,000s, which was just spectacular, amazing. And then also the fact that we got recognized as one of the music school districts in the country. They were very complimentary of our district. Our reputation's out there in the Madison area. So good. Well, it's nice to see you again, and good luck at Madison, okay? And we have our picture at this, okay. Great. That takes us to action items D, shared services agreement, Dane County School to Work. Brian or Andy or Gina?
This is an annual project that we work on with Dane County Schools. For the last 10 plus years, I have been one of the oversight superintendents working with Josh Fassel, our director, and this is for next year's shared service agreement. The only thing that is different is we used to house our Dane County School to Work program at the Monona Grove School District, and now we are looking at hosting it on private space because, there's no surprise, Monona Grove is growing quickly and running out of the space, and they need that space for classrooms for next year. So we bring that to you for your approval.
Anyone with any questions for Brian on that? Gina, have you reviewed the contract? Okay, and is it acceptable to you?
It is.
Okay. With no questions, I'd entertain a motion to approve the shared services agreement for Dane County School to Work.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, would you call the roll?
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Ms. Oderico?
Yes.
Ms. Feeney?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Mr. Zach?
Yes. You know we're going to make you make every motion. You know, the new person makes every motion now. Yeah, okay. Just so you know the protocol here.
I'm picking it up.
So that way you get in the Oregon Observer even more. Committee reports, will pass by that because we haven't met, and we're going to have a discussion on the committee of the whole in a few minutes. That takes us to informational items F, parameters for the 2021 school year, and this is in anticipation of establishing the next calendar out. And before we do that, we want to make sure we're all on the same page. I know we've done this before, but before you go out, you should need the comfort that the board says these are the appropriate parameters for you to utilize from our standpoint when you go solicit feedback. So the floor is yours, Gina. And everyone should have the parameters document to review.
All right, thank you. So for those of you new to the board, I wanted to share the parameters that some of which I've inherited when I started and some of which we've developed with the board over time. And so as we go to build the calendar for the 2021 school year, I just want to make sure that we have the parameters settled for that. In terms of what our process is generally I meet with leadership from the OEA to talk about their interest in the calendar, and then we survey staff and parents and guardians to solicit their feedback. Sometimes we give them 2 drafts to consider, and other times it's more open-ended. It really just depends on the feedback that we're seeking. So in terms of looking to build the 2021 calendar, I started with the state law and administrative code that we're working with. By law, we're required to start school September 1st or later unless there's a year-round school. And what I learned last year is that it's important for me to do some re-educating of the community around that because there's some confusion. And I was looking ahead in 2021, Labor Day is late. And so, I suspect we will be starting September 1st, but I haven't worked in the days yet. So that'll be a little bit confusing because sometimes people think we can't start until after Labor Day, which is not the case. It just happens to fall that way about once every 7 years. So we look at that, and then DPI has the instructional minutes that we need to make sure that we have. And so with that in mind, we usually have a minimum of 176 instruction days. Ideally, we have 177 or 178, but it just depends on how the days fall. But that's really the minimum, at least since the time that I've been here, that we've had. And then we look at the contract requirements. Educators in our district have 195 days in their contract, but 5 of those are for the pathway days that were part of the educator compensation referendum, and those are not typically not on the calendar. Then I look to the employee handbook as to what the holidays are for staff, and that's a board decision-making point there if that's something that you wanted to change. But those are the holidays that we have for full year staff, and some of them fall during the school year. Then I look at what our school customs have been. And traditionally we have had comp time in the calendar for parent-teacher conferences. That traditionally has been the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. That is a non-school day. And then we do a day in June that doesn't impact the instructional calendar. We try to look at an equitable number of days for the semester because particularly at the high school we do have semester courses, so we try to get those as even as we can in a way that makes sense. We try to have an equitable number of days per quarter if we can. We then also look at having our PD days throughout the calendar because we know that's best practice for adult learning. It also helps us to learn on a professional development day and then engage our students in the classroom and then come back and reflect on that. And then we customarily have had a week for spring break, which is not the case in all districts. So I did want to put that on here and draw that to your attention. Then I also look at what is just customary in our community and what do our parents and guardians and staff tell us on the surveys that we send. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving, we usually get about 80% of our staff and parents and guardians tell us that they really like that. So we've stuck with that structure. Our community has told us it's really important to them for Martin Luther King Jr. Day to be at least a non-student day, if not a holiday for all staff. Again, the week-long spring break is a community custom that pulls very well. Typically, the last day has been a half day. Now this year, that's going to be different. So we'll see if people prefer that or if they like the half day idea. We haven't done that before. We're doing it this time to make up minutes. We have typically had the graduation be the second Sunday in June. So that's something that the community has come to rely on in terms of making plans. And in the 7 years I've been here, we've built in 3 snow days, and this year that was not enough. So maybe looking at that for the calendar for 2021. So those have been my typical parameters. If you remember, this is the first year that we're trying where the seniors get out early, and you're smiling. So, and we did build that into next year's calendar, but we haven't tried it yet. So as much as we want to get the calendar done as early as possible, I think we felt as though maybe we should wait to try it 1 year before we start talking about the 2021 calendar. Additionally, I've been reluctant to send a survey out in summer because we just want as much as participation as possible. But I would love your feedback on that as well. So typically what my practice has been is to get the survey out mid-September because we want the school year to get started, and then try to bring the calendar to the board in October so that people have as much notice as possible. But if you think a different timing is better, I'm very open to that.
Comments or questions for Gina? Anna?
I just have one question, and maybe I blanked out when you were talking about it. But did you mention if you try to set a week for the spring break Did I blank out on that when you were talking about that?
We do have a week-long spring break. I haven't had it any shorter than that in the past.
I mean, like what month or when it would fall? Has that been historically set at a specific time, month or period of time?
We did move last year to looking towards having consistency in terms of the last week of March, but how you define last week can differ. So we talk as HR directors and try to have as uniform a spring break as possible, which isn't always easy. We also look at UW-Madison's spring break to see if we can align with them, but sometimes they're very early or very late. So for the last 2 years, we've tried to do the last full week in March.
So one of the parameters then would be week-long spring break in alignment with other districts in UW as much as possible, or if possible?
If possible.
Okay.
A couple things. As we built this calendar that we're in right now, I remember we had quite a few discussions about different things, and one of them was having the PD days sprinkled throughout the year. And I'm just wondering if you have, first of all, any anecdotal feedback that has been beneficial based on what we thought it would do.
So I would say in coordination with Dr. Bergstrom that yes, that we feel that that is really critical to have those days throughout the year so that we can have learning and then time to engage with students and then time to reflect on that learning. It also gives us time when we're doing testing to look at the data from the testing to see if we need to refine anything for our students. Additionally, as you can imagine, to have 5 days in August or 5 days when the school year is over, that just isn't the best time for us to have adult learning that can impact the classroom. And actually, that's a structure that was here when I was hired 7 years ago. And I think there was extensive research done at the time that was implemented on that being the most impactful for student achievement. We do hear from our families, and that has been declining in terms of that being hard because thanks to Amy Miller and the Community Ed Department, they have really increased every year. They have community education programs on those days that fall in the school year. So our families that need a place for their children to be that's engaging, they do have that opportunity through community ed for K through 6. And Amy is always looking to expand those opportunities. So that has been really helpful and we've gotten great feedback on that.
Awesome. Just one other question too. I know we also tried kind of a mixture of Fridays and Mondays. And I'm kind of wondering in terms of from an equity perspective, if we've heard anything where Fridays maybe are a little bit easier, Mondays may not, in terms of parents getting off work. And there's, I know that Amy's doing that program, which is amazing, but sometimes families can't do that. And so I've just kind of wondered if we've heard anything or if that's going to be part of the survey as we go forward about a Friday versus a Monday.
We do survey on that. It's a great question. And in the past, our parents and guardians have been split on that. So when we build the calendar, I try to do half and half to try to meet those needs. And it really depends on anything else that's happening around those days. So for example, in April, we traditionally have had the Monday after Good Friday to be a PD day because then those families who are traveling can travel. And then we have a Monday versus like if Monday would be a holiday, I'm thinking about like federal holiday. We have a lot of federal and bank employees in our community. So if there's a banking holiday on a Monday, then we might choose that to be the PD day or the Friday so that, families don't have to spend their vacation because school is out.
Any other comments? Troy?
Just a question. Is the 176 days, is that a state requirement or is it purely minutes?
It's a minute and a contractual requirement. So if you think about 195 days in a teacher contract, then teachers also have 3 holidays, 2 parent-teacher compensation days. So when you look at that, it's really, I think, the fine balance between having days where we have more than the DPI minimum, but then also have the most number of contractual days that are instructional.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Anybody have any disagreement or any additional parameters that we would like Gina to consider as she processes community input? Okay, I think you're set to go. I mean,
Thank
we've
you.
got broader issues related to calendar, actually, in my mind, but those are more structural as opposed to working under our current framework and long-term visioning stuff. So, but within the framework that we've got, these would match the protocol that I would look at. So you can take these knowing that, the board has had an opportunity to review them and give you feedback. I think it's safe to say that they represent the board's understanding as well. So on your timetable, we're looking for sometime next fall to bring a calendar for us to review. Do you have any questions for us or anything on direction?
That's perfect, thank you.
Okay, good. That takes us to item F2, Committee of the Whole, and this is a continuation of our discussion as how to arrange ourselves in terms of board committee work, and something we talked about at our workshop, and I indicated to you I'd bring you a consideration. I think the board had some interest in pursuing that, at least on a one-year trial basis, and so I have a document at your table that I put together. The policy that governs board committee work is 174, and so I pasted that in there. And then if we would pursue these are just my thoughts about how we could approach it. It's certainly worth, we can revise it as necessary. But we would suspend until the next board reorg meeting, which would be in April 2020, the application of policy 174, which requires us to have a policy and a visioning committee, and then assign that work to a committee of the whole, with us working in a work session format. Gina and Katie had obtained the information that WASB had on the subject. There wasn't a lot of it on it, and where they talk about committee of the whole, they phrase them sometimes as work sessions, the board operating under work sessions. So I've tried to incorporate some of that language in here. But if we would go that way, we would work as the committee of the whole, functioning to discuss pertinent policy and visioning topics, and that would include gathering of information and data, receiving input from the appropriate people in a more informal way than, for example, at a board meeting, and then having discussion and evaluating potential courses of action, whether it be moving forward with visioning or working on a policy. As we discussed in our work session, I'd anticipate this doing one of our regular monthly meetings, probably the second one, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that. And the way we would post that, we'd have it posted as a regular board meeting. So we would convene as a regular board and have our public comment, have our business items like approval of the vouchers and any contracts that we would need, and then have a bullet point agenda item to consider to moving into committee of the whole for engaging in, and then it would be, for example, policy, and this is just an example, review board policy, whatever number that is. That's just an example. Or visioning, if we were reviewing the path forward, we would put that as a consideration to satisfy open meetings law. And then a phrase that we'll not take any formal action in there, and then a point to return to the regular meeting at the conclusion of the work, and we could then potentially act on any action item or act on anything discussed in the committee of the whole if we were ready, or move on to a regular agenda if we had it, which I don't anticipate that, or adjourning. So.
Would we be able to act on something at the subsequent board meeting if it's not part of the posted agenda?
I would defer to Gina on that. It depends on how detailed the posting is with the committee of the whole, notifying the public of that. I think we probably could. I just don't know that that would be our practice. I thought as I was thinking about, the intent was to work on it and then have time to prepare and then put it as a formal agenda item at the next regular board meeting. But there might be something that's so cut and dried that we'd want to come out and do it. So I think the question is twofold. One is, legally, could we do it? And two, would we want to do that from a board governance perspective? Gina?
I would say legally we'd have to notice it and go back as a board to take action on it. And there may be times when, just for timing's sake, I can think of particularly in the summer if there's only one board meeting, that we might need to do that. But we would know that in advance and we would notice it that way.
Because that was my question, is that if we're looking at committee of the whole and the summer, we only have one meeting per month, would we have a committee of the whole meeting each month during the summer, or would we, I mean, I know this is kind of getting in the weeds, but I think those are some things to think about, that we don't want to take a summer off from committee work, basically.
Right, I think that we'd have to, we're going to have to, if we go this route, we're going to have to add our next meeting, or even, we've got a expulsion hearing, maybe we could do 15, 20 minutes and approving this sort of resolution or a motion to approve going to the committee of the whole, and then spend some time, what do we need to talk about from policy right away? What do we need to talk about visioning, and set that up for the first meeting in June, because we don't have a meeting after this. So, yeah. Courtney?
Steve, would those meetings be on camera then?
My envisioning was we would hold them over in the conference room over where it's more conducive to that type of comments, so it wouldn't be, but if we wanted to, we could just circle up here and have them on camera. I don't have a strong feeling either way. So then one of the aspects of I'm on the third bullet point then. One of the aspects that you normally read about committee of the whole is the advantage of them is they function informally, and so we don't use Robert's rules. There are no motions. The only motion would be to return to the regular board meeting, and then you'd vote on that. But other than that, you would take no formal action that would guide the governance of the district. And then the third one would be, right now the board president is empowered to appoint the committee chairs. We can go that way, or we could have folks volunteer for doing that, or we could rotate that. I don't have a strong feeling. We could assign them, we could have a number of different people working on different policies, and being charged of that, and leading the conversation on any particular topic. So, and then whoever's going to be doing that and presiding over that would be, charges in advance. You're in charge at the next committee of the whole. This is going to be the agenda item. Marshal the documents. You're going to lead the conversation. Whoever is relevant that needs to be there should be there. Facilitate the conversation and do whatever is necessary after that to bring the item in a purple or whatever to the board meeting. That's how I'd envision that. And we can rotate that so everybody gets a chance to facilitate one of those, which I kind of like that idea. So that was my thought in terms of proceeding, given what we talked about at our board in service. There seemed to be interest in doing that. So this was kind of my starting shot at it. And if we like that, like I said, we're going to have an expulsion hearing. There's no reason we can't, in order to get underway, have before the expulsion hearing a 15-minute session where we would formally approve a committee of the whole type of process for a trial period of 1 year, and then talk about, okay, who's going to be the policy for the first one, who's going to be the facilitator for visioning, and what would the agenda items do you think we need to talk about? And how would we go about that? And then set that for the first, since we're not going to have a second meeting in June either, so we could, I don't know the agenda for June. I don't know if we'd have time for a committee of the whole, or we'd have to talk about that. So, what do you think?
I think this looks good to me. I think it addresses some of the comments that we heard at the our meeting a couple of weeks ago related to still building some leadership within the group by having different board members take the lead on either policy or the visioning components of that. So I think that is a good way to handle that. I think it makes a lot of sense. So I would be in support of this trial, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, there's really not a lot out there. I was kind of surprised when I was looking for it. So, any other comments? There aren't a lot of boards that have formal, committee of the whole policies on that. They're referenced. You'll see, as I was Googling Wisconsin school board policy committee of the whole, and found some where they just talk about we're going to meet in a committee of the whole, but they don't tell you how it functions at all. Just kind of references, and we got some examples, but they're more of board is going to work in a work session type of format, which is really a committee of the whole. They just call it differently. Not a lot of feedback. We okay?
I'm just
Chris?
wondering if the initial committee of the whole could potentially be what are topics that are out there which will help lead it, which is probably your plan.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So,
Steve, I guess I would say that when I first joined the board, we used to have a work session as a matter of course after every meeting, if not every meeting, most meetings, that worked probably like a committee of the whole. And those were very beneficial in that we worked really closely with administration and we learned kind of together in depth about a lot of important topics before the board. So I think there was some benefit in those work sessions, and this to me would sort of mimic that and probably create a better forum for everyone getting the same information at the same time. So I think it's worth a try for a year. I would be in support.
yeah, that was my thought too, Courtney. I was thinking back to the same thing when we worked in work session. It was really a committee of the whole, if you really wanted to formalize what that was. And it was a lot like what we did in our in-service a couple weeks ago, that sort of forum. And I think all of us came away from that, including the administrative team, thinking that was really a terrific event. So, okay. Any other feedback? Otherwise, I think what I'd probably try.
Yeah, my only comment would be, I like all of this. My only comment would be, I think we would want to be pretty cautious about voting on anything that same evening after a committee of the whole topic. I think we just want to try and plan things out so that we had enough time after that committee of the whole meeting to put it on a regular meeting agenda, a subsequent meeting agenda, just so that we're not moving too quickly on anything that there might be some other input to gain from. And then I guess just logistically, it does seem like we do have quite a few topics that we need to get into on both policy and visioning. So looking ahead, there's not another May meeting and only one in June, so we might want to think about a committee of the whole meeting.
A special one in addition to, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm thinking the same thing. And for purposes of adopting this, what I'm hearing is interest that we're not really keen on coming back into regular session to vote on anything we discussed in the committee of the whole unless it's an unusual situation. So I'll rephrase that we could do that, but that would have to be in unusual circumstances and not the norm. So, do we have an expulsion hearing date set yet? We don't? Okay.
Brian and I have it.
Okay, I will work with Brian and with Katie on kind of timing of when the board gets together to approve this. Maybe it's at the first meeting in June. I'd like to get it before then, if possible, because we do have a lot of things stacked up. And so ideally, if we're gathered for an expulsion, that would work. If not, we'll look at some other time. We're working on a couple other dates as well. That work with everyone? Okay. New construction project information F3 with preliminary timeline and decision points. Brian, I think that's yours. Okay. We've got a lot of things moving forward with respect to the new school project, and so the intent of this was to provide the board with, and the public with some of the decision-making timelines and decision points forward. So, floor is yours, Brian.
Okay, board members, this is a first draft that is a summary from our in-service last week? 2 weeks ago. Last week. Oh my goodness, May goes by in a hurry. So Erica and I spent some time together just to give you a sense, and I'm going to just press Andy's.
You can move it wherever it's not connected anymore. As long as we don't lose battery.
We haven't lost battery power yet. Oh,
Try escape. Try play. Press it. Top right hand.
top right. Ah. I generally am computer literate. It's just a little different than my Mac. Now we have it. We've identified a number of, I'll say, key items that lie ahead, and we talked about them at the in-service. The first one, again, these are not in priority order, is the school boundaries. And you'll notice that one particular chevron, arrow, whatever we'd like to call that, is colored differently. And what I heard from a couple of board members was identify where there's a requirement for board approval. We started the planning process in April. We've been working with Mark Roffers. We have a committee purpose, we have committee members, and we have our meeting scheduled. Actually, May 20th is the boundary committee kickoff meeting. And right now it looks like the committee will meet about 5 times. We're planning on bringing a recommendation back to the board in September. So remember, we're never a same night decision group. So we bring that recommendation back to the board in September, and then we'd look at an October board approval. So typically we have 2 board meetings in October. Likely, if I were to pick today, I'd say the first meeting makes the most sense in October for the board to take action on that boundary approval. Then when we look...
To go back to that. So this is, we need to establish boundaries for the elementary schools and for 5, 6 because of the new building out in
Yes.
out in Fitchburg. So this is the process by which we're going to do that, and the board has indicated that they wanted to be part of the approval process on this. So board have any questions or comments on this? We're not going to vote on the process, but do we have any comments?
And again, we've been operating under the idea that currently we have what I would describe as dynamic boundaries, meaning we try to make the boundary work for the family, and we try to make the boundary work for balancing class sizes. And to a large degree, we have been able to do that successfully for the past several years. Again, we need some general boundaries, and then we will work and adjust it along the way.
Can you just tell us what the committee is comprised of in terms of parents or students or whomever is on there?
Yes, Leslie is chairing the committee. Andy is on the committee as well. Carrie Majeski is our school principal on the committee. And then we have, Leslie, up to 15 parents?
Yes, right now we have 9 confirmed parents who are coming to boundary meeting, and about 7 of the rest of us, meaning administrators or the registrar, etc.
And remember, the goal is to have parents that have children in the mix, as opposed to community member parents that may have had children in the mix years ago.
Any other questions? Oh, you better plug in, buddy.
You got about a minute and a half.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't talk that fast.
And I got a message from Mr. LeBrun that he's in Janesville and he's about 7:30 arrival time. So I was hoping he was at a stop sign and not texting and driving.
Okay, I'll just skip ahead to the next one. Again, this is a first shot. Give us feedback. You'll see some are, there's greater detail, some there's less detail. This is the transportation and the school start. You'll recall we were looking at this past year, or actually 2 years ago, and one of the conclusions that the visioning committee drew was, let's make the school start change at the time when we're redoing transportation for the entire district, with the idea that the referendum would pass, so that we're not making a change 2 years, then coming back and making another change. Andy and Mark have been working on it for a number of years. They've also gone back and done some work with the consultant previously. That was January 2019. They are working on some near final routes to get to the visioning committee. At one time we had that targeted for May 2019, and we slowed that process down a little bit with the boundary study. Again, we'd like to bring sort of our school start times in terms of finalizing them, and
Happy computer.
the world all comes down to a battery and power and electricity. We'd like to be able to come back, and Andy might be able to comment in terms of the near final routing.
It's not working.
Nope.
Sorry. What now?
When you went the other direction, it liked it.
Yep.
Okay, we're back. And again, to communicate our plan to families this October, you know our starting target has been to, with school start times, has been to start our elementary schools earlier and our middle school and high school later. And Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, we need a 45-minute differential between the middle school, high school, and our elementary schools in order to make the double bus run, now I'm realize I'm talking in almost a foreign language, work for the system. So did
Yeah.
I get that right?
Yep, they were recommending an hour at first, but we feel like we can get it down to the 45 minutes.
So we used what we had shared with the visioning committee as, you know, that change from elementary first, middle school, high school second. We're using that as a planning parameter, but I think that's very appropriate for the board to take final approval on that. And there is sort of a, we don't really, the last slide you'll see is how we market and communicate some of the information, because we don't want to confuse parents for September 2019. And you'll notice we don't necessarily release this in a big public way until after that, so we get this next school year, even though we're still in a school year, off to a good start.
That being the case, why wouldn't we just bump back the board approval till after the school start dates? Just because that's going to be reported on, and so we don't confuse people.
We absolutely can. This is the last piece that Andy and I brainstormed on my white marker board, so you're seeing it just as, and we brainstormed this prior to the boundary committee, so we can make that is an easy adjustment to make.
Yeah, we just come in September.
With the calendar.
Yeah.
With the school calendar, like Gina does, so that, because they're used to that pattern, right?
Yeah, we could do it in
We
September.
could do that. Are you visioning the board approving the transportation plan? Because I'm not sure I totally want to look at that and approve that level of detail. School start time is something I think the board wanted to weigh in on, and also not just in terms of how it interacted with transportation, because that will play a role in it, but also from an educational standpoint, I think the board would want some information educationally about the school start time too. Yeah. So looking at that in September.
Okay.
And that might be something that would be in the purview of the, committee of the whole visioning is to have the school start time as a topic for the visioning part of that in terms of the educational component and see how that would dovetail with the transportation. I think they're going to dovetail, but from our due diligence standpoint, I think that would be a committee of the whole topic. Okay. Any other questions from the board? Okay. So we're going to just bump that July then to September, right?
Yes.
Okay. Andy, you got more time.
This was a question that we received about staffing, and in terms of staffing for our fourth elementary school, there's 4 big parts on the top, and part number 1 is naming our, having a decision relative to who is the school principal, because that's a question that our staff will be asking before they suggest or before they submit letters of interest. Again, this is what you're looking at is working draft. So we'd like to get the school year off to a start. Monday, September 16th is our target date for announcing our principal. We also want to share the staffing process with current staff. Again, we're now 2 weeks into the start of the school because the month of August, we need to be focused on getting school started. The first 2 weeks, we need to focus on getting the routine working. By mid-September, we can share the staffing process, and Gina has been working on that. By November of 2019, we would secure the staff letters of interest if they're interested in working at the new school. We'd also hire an administrative intern. That's something that we put into the referendum budget. Then in December, we would work on interviews, and here's the real, if there's only one thing you take away from staffing, I want you to take away this next point. Did I set the anticipatory, that was an anticipatory set for you. And that is, the interview process is going to involve all K through 6 principals. And the reason, we're not just staffing a new school, we are staffing all of our schools, and likely we will have some individuals from all 4 of those schools going to the new school, and we want all of the principals to be involved in that. We don't want to deplete a school, so to speak, and we want a nice cross-representation at the new school and maintain that nice cross-representation in terms of experience, age, background, and interest across all of our schools. So we're really staffing all of our elementary schools plus RCI. Then in February of 2020, that's when we believe we will have the new school staffed with existing staff members, and Gina can then post our staff vacancies that we know for all of our K-6 schools at the same time. Again, this is a little ahead of the staffing process. Additional positions we would add, and then we would go through and hire the vacancies for Brooklyn, Netherwood, Prairie View, and RCI. So what was the most important point that I made? Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, Barb. And again, this tends not to be an area that would be a board decision point, but if you have feedback for us, we would welcome it.
Just a comment, which is that in in September of 2020, when that new school year begins, the new school will be a K-6. Netherwood, Brooklyn, and Prairie View will remain K-4. RCI will remain 5-6, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, just so that everybody's clear on that too.
And if our enrollment projections continue to roll out as they have, remember RCI is one of our schools that has the greatest overcapacity, I will call it. Okay, I'm just going to click ahead. Naming. One thing that I forgot to include in this, but I put in the weekly update, is the concept of the name of the district. And Gina and I did a review. She did the legal review with the WASB. You might find this a surprise. The board can change the name of a school district by posting it as an agenda item and taking majority vote of the board. I was thinking it would require perhaps a Class 2 notice, which means it's noticed twice prior to doing that. I've talked to a few of my friends that across the state, when they've made a change to their school district name, this is not the process I'm recommending. This is just a process for you to contemplate. Oftentimes, their boards placed on the agenda public feedback on the changing of the name of the district. And maybe you do that once, maybe you do that twice, and usually the boards have led with, here's the name of the district that we're contemplating. So people have something to react to. And at some of those public meetings, no one showed up. At some of the other public meetings, a handful of people showed up. So far, at none of the public meetings of anyone that I've spoke to has there been a large constituency that showed up. So that's a process that the board could entertain, and we could talk more, detail about that. But the authority rests in the statute with the school board for the naming of the school district. This is really focused on naming the 4th elementary school. And we talked about getting our process started in July, and then in August of 2019, inviting students, staff, families, community members to submit possible names for consideration. We would send out an invitation. I've done some checking with schools. It's common for districts when they're naming a new school to send out some guidelines. Some of those guidelines are part of board policy. Some of those guidelines are not part of board policy, and they get connected together. So we could put together a proposal. We haven't put one together yet, but we would put together that proposal for you to take a look at. If we were to start that in August, what would be nice, you remember we have our annual meeting the 4th Monday in September. If we were to get all of the names in, and Erica was able to compile that list, say there's 200 names. I'm just picking a number. We could then have that information at the annual meeting and share that with the community. I would say the annual meeting is the one meeting of the year where more people tune in than any other meeting. And again, what we have in a draft, you see the green chevron. I guess we should have had a green chevron in August of 2019 when we finalized the criteria for the names. At the October 14th board meeting, the board could sift and winnow through, again, I'm just providing a number, 200 names down to 2 to 5 names, and then we'd have an opportunity, perhaps a week-long voting. I know John Tanner is working on the electronic process that would make sure that everyone only gets to vote once. But offering it, again, many times with Rome Corners, we offered it to students and the option to vote on the name of the school. Again, majority rule usually is what carries the day. And then at the October 28th board meeting, the school name could be finalized based on the votes. I will be quiet for a second because this you might have some feedback on.
Anybody? My only suggestion is we would need to be involved in the guidelines in discussing those, so that's got to be green there. And I think in October, when the information goes out to the students for voting, that would include kind of, explanations, like if it's historical or significance of that, so that the students would know why they're on there and that sort of stuff, so that the vote for the students would be informed.
Yeah, I mean, we just redid the naming guidelines as part of board policy, so that's pretty up to date, and we had a pretty robust discussion about that just in the last year. I guess my question would be, I think we talked about this too in terms of what students would vote. Is there a reason why you said K-6 instead of K-12?
Initially, when we talked about it, we said K-6, but if I had my druthers, I'd open it up K-12. we know we'd get about 4,100 votes, plus or minus. I'd like to think that we'd get 4,100 votes.
Sounds like everybody is on board with a K-12 vote, so all students enrolled in October 19 would have the opportunity to vote on the new school's name. Okay. We're good on that then, with the suggestions.
This is again, it's an incomplete. You didn't see working draft on all of these slides, but they really are in working draft format. This is, at the in-service, we talked about our public communication process, similar to the public communication process we used with the 2014 referendum. And in a nutshell, I always send out an end of the school year parent message. In addition to that end of the school year parent message, we are shooting for having the construction newsletter, sort of our first construction newsletter, and I left it on my desk. You're familiar with those construction newsletters that we've used in the past. They're a color brochure. There's an introductory letter from me, and then a number of pictures and highlights that we want to point to for parents. So we would include that in June, in the middle of the month. We'd set our sort of second piece. It says October. It's probably, I'll say November, so that we can include and announce the new school name. And that really comes together in October. We could tie together the school start times and transportation and boundary committee update all at the same time and weave that into the second construction newsletter, because it's a great opportunity for not only parents to learn about it, but community members in general to learn about it. And then April, May of 2020, while we are in the home stretch, we would send out our final construction newsletter that will say the building will be completed on time. We're all set for the September 1 start. And again, that's just a quick little thumbnail sketch based on our conversation about public communication at our in-service. Oh, I knew there was one more slide. So any feedback for us on this?
Okay, go to the next one.
And then the last slide, you've seen this in our weekly updates. This is the construction schedule, and it doesn't highlight everything because Findorf and Bray have a construction schedule with 500 some items on it. So I picked out what I saw as really the big items, and of course everything we're focused up on that September 1, 2020 first day of school in our fourth elementary school. The other item that I should have included now in retrospect on the construction schedule is Findorf will be preparing a weekly sort of picture. You might recall, what are they called, Andy?
It's a weekly update or something.
Yeah, they have some fancy name for it, and it is a picture of either the school site or a particular piece of construction that's going on with a real short little update. They did it with the 2014 referendum. They email it to us late Friday afternoon, so oftentimes you're like a week behind in the weekly update because we don't exactly know what they're going to have in it, and oftentimes we've already posted the weekly update by the time we receive it.
Executive summary.
Executive summary. Oh, very creative name. It is kind of a fun way, if you're interested in those school construction facts, to track the project over time. And I think I've shared this with you several times already.
Any questions on the construction schedule? Anything else? That was really helpful, Brian. Thanks for pulling that together. And the community should know that building the new school isn't just getting the bricks and mortars up. There's a lot of planning that's going to go into creating that new school and staffing it, and we've got a comprehensive plan to address that, and that's been worked on for some time now. So good job, and we'll proceed under that schedule.
And I'll include it in this week's update in case you want to refer to it.
Right.
Again, that's just consider it working draft, and you are welcome to make adjustments to it.
And as was indicated on those documents, part of our public relations, a piece of that is to communicate what we saw tonight in a month or so, right? Yep.
Yes.
Or sooner, yeah. Great. Okay, that takes us to information item F4, that's state budget 2021.
I might be, Andy, can I grab that?
We can look on.
Oh, no, we do have enough.
Yeah.
I miscounted. Well, if you're like me, you're reading a lot about the state budget and what's going to get approved or what's not going to get approved. And I've watched this occur for a long time. And what I can tell you is eventually we have a state budget. And making a prediction on what it's going to look like is sometimes difficult. This information was prepared by John Forrester. He works with the School Administrator Alliance, and this was the annual education conference this past April here in Madison that I attended. I would say the big piece that John shared with us is his view is once all of the negotiating goes back and forth, the revenue limit of $200 and $204 for next year and the following year, that is going to be a hallmark piece of the state budget. Additionally, he believes the special education categorical reimbursement is going to be raised, and we're currently at 24.5%. And the conversation, there were two Republican legislators at our conference, one the co-chair, John Nygren, and Luther Olson, who's been a long-time education committee member. They recognize the fact that special education has not increased for a long time, and they even said a little budget joke, which I thought was interesting, because years ago there was conversation about how public schools identified a lot of special education students as a money-making proposition. And as they were speaking to the audience, they said, "We know you're not doing that, because for every dollar you spend, we give you 24 cents. That's not a money-making proposition." So I think that has finally worked its way through the legislature, and they understand that special education, many public schools have reduced regular education to help pay for special education, and we don't want our various education pieces to be in competition with one another. But this increase in special education would not be earmarked to be spent on special ed. It would just be a general purpose revenue. So this contains a lot of information. I just picked out those two highlights, and we'll continue to monitor the state budget. And that day we were told, you'll have a state budget before July 1st. We'll have to wait and see if we have a state budget before July 1st.
I'll take money on that. That's not happening. So lock in. Superintendent's report. And Tim's here. Hi, Tim. Beckon's here too somewhere. I saw her walk in. Did she win? I don't know. She did? All right. Good. Soup report.
Okay, a couple of quick things. Today I had the opportunity to spend time outside at Lerner Park with our 8th graders. We had 300 8th graders at Lerner Park on the joint Rotary 8th grade project, and we had groups pulling honeysuckle. We planted 3,000 perennial plants, and that was those were all grown by our students in the greenhouse at Oregon Middle School. They were super, super excited about that. We also updated some of the trails, so if you have an opportunity to go through Lerner Park, I think you will find it's looking amazing. It's beautiful this time of the year with birds and all of the greenery. You've already heard from Emily. Honors Night is this Wednesday on May 15th. If you've never had an opportunity to attend Honors Night and you're free on Wednesday nights, you should come. It is really a remarkable night celebrating the great things our high school students do, and also a celebration for our community and their generosity to provide scholarships to our students. On April 28th, it was the Top 10 Scholars Awards for the Oregon School District and all Badger Conference districts. Aaron Flanagan and our Becken Pearson. Becken, are you still here?
She's getting pretty.
Are two of the top 10 scholars, so congratulations to those two as well as to the other 8 students. We had 16 Oregon School District students participate in a Dane County Summit on Equity 2 Mondays ago. There were 250 students totally Dane County wide, and this was put together by the Dane County Superintendent Equity Committee, along with a number of other administrators that are working with that equity committee. And speaking of that, I shared this date with you, September 11th, at the Monona Grove School District. There's going to be a training session for school board members. I believe it starts at 5 or 5:30. Katie and I will double check that. It would be great. We would post the meeting, no matter how many board members go, that no action will be taken by our board, but a majority of the board may be at the meeting. We don't have the agenda complete yet, but we're working on that, and as soon as that agenda is complete, I will get that to everyone.
Is that an evening meeting?
That is an evening meeting.
Okay. Well, do you have an approximate 6 or
5:30 to 9.
5:30 to 9.
All right. I've got it on my calendar.
And then I believe Katie has a doodle poll out on our board debriefing session on the school leadership team reports. Jim had some availability the first week in June. That's Jim Rickabaugh. So as soon as we get that pinned down, we will let you know on that potential date. And then my last item, this past weekend, this is very exciting news. Please pay sharp attention to this. This past weekend, 2 of our administrative team colleagues graduated from the University of Wisconsin Educational Leadership and Policy Analysis. And we have 2 new colleagues. They are our newest PhDs. Please join me in recognizing Dr. Anderson and Dr. Widensee. As you can imagine, we are exceedingly proud of them and their accomplishments over the year, because that is a marathon to get that completed, and they have smiles on their faces. So I'm sure they're also sleeping a little bit more too now, but we're excited for them, and I will share a photo with you of the 2 of them as they're all dressed and getting ready for their commencement program. So again, congratulations to Candace and Shannon. And that concludes my report.
Any questions of Brian on that? Okay. Future agenda, I don't think we have anything there. We're not meeting on the 4th Monday of this month, because that's Memorial Day. So our next meeting will be June 10th. All right, and then we're not going to have a meeting on June 24th, our meeting, because that's the administrative retreat that week, okay? Graduation is June 9th, the Sunday, so that will be before our next regularly scheduled meeting. All board members are invited to participate in commencement exercises on Sunday, June 9th. So if you're going to be there for that, you have to let Katie know so that we can set up the appropriate spots for you, okay? And that will again be, I think, forever in the new gym. So it's a 1 p.m. start time. Board members have to get here at 12:30, so let Katie know. It's one of the great moments of being on the board that day. And also a graduate too, right? Yeah, okay. Good. So that, in terms of agenda, we've got an expulsion hearing lurking out there. We want to get the feedback on the leadership team things in a special meeting. So check your doodle polls so that we can get those things scheduled. And then Brian and I are meeting tomorrow for lunch to kind of go over our plan that would include the committee of the whole and kind of figuring out what's there. I'll be in touch with you guys on that. Okay. Any agenda items anybody wants to raise right now? All right. We're gonna do checkout in a second. We're gonna take our picture, our annual board picture with our student reps out there. If you need an individual pic, they're ready to do that. If you liked your one from last year, you can keep that one, right?
You can keep it, or you can get a new one.
Okay. So as soon as we're done with checkout, the board's gonna go take their picture, so we'll be off camera. Our meeting will end there. When we're done with our picture, we will be adjourning into closed session and we will not come into open session. So checkout, Courtney? Nothing? Anna?
Nada.
Anything, Emily? Tim, welcome.
Thank you. So
Very-
sorry I was late for
No.
the meeting in Chicago.
Yeah, and then it's really a nice road back once you get to the Wisconsin border on the way up, right? How is that now, bad?
It wasn't as bad as it was getting out of Chicago.
Okay. Krista? Okay, and I don't have anything. Thanks, everyone. We're done with the formal presentation. We're going to go get our picture taken and go into closed session. Thanks.
I will.